So drawing characters for me is an iterative process. Make a new layer over the old one and lighten the old layer. Clip Studio has a nice feature that you can turn a layer to light blue, which is to replicate the real world process of using a non-photo blue pencil. And it's really convenient, but you can do the same thing in most other programs. Just set up an action in Photoshop or maybe even, I don't know, they maybe even have that feature already built in on some programs. With a pen and paper, or a pencil and paper, you could use a tracing paper or use a light table and a new sheet of paper, or just, depending on how dark you draw, just stick another sheet of paper over top of it and start redrawing it. So on the new layer, I'm going over the previous drawing, and what I'm doing is I'm adding detail and adding definition, but trying to not lose the freshness of the first drawing, trying to keep the overall shapes and the idea. Because when you're first drawing, it's really loose and it looks cool and there's a lot of energy to it. And you don't want to lose that energy when you're refining it. It's a hard thing. Sometimes you'll see some really, really great sketches by people, and then their finished artwork just looks kind of stiff. And I don't think you want to do that. I think it's good to keep that freshness. It's hard to do though. Maybe as I get better, my first sketch will be good enough. But for right now, I usually need to redraw the original, often several times, because I don't really know what I'm drawing at first. I'm making this up as I go. And so I'm putting in shapes and I'm creating as I go. So as I do these iterations, I'm actually creating forms that weren't there in the previous iterations. So for example, I'm segmenting this armor, which I hadn't done in the first drawing. It was all, more figurative before. I'm adding these little accents, these little kind of spikes on the armor, putting a little more detail into the hands and the fingers. As you draw, I suggest sticking to things you like and are familiar with. So for me, I like armor and knights and fantasy. So this sort of thing, characters tends to come out when I draw. And I really didn't even think about it before I started drawing. I didn't have any sort of plan of what I was going to do. I just sort of went with it and sort of turned my brain off and just started drawing. And it's nice to see what comes out. You'll kind of find out what you're into, what you're interested in, or maybe, what you've been thinking about or looking at. I do like fantasy art, and I do like armor. I have a nice collection of reference photos and books about arms and armor. When I go to the Metropolitan Museum, I definitely check out the arms and armor collection there. And all that's going to come out in your drawing. All the things that you're into, the things that you've copied or drawn before, the things you like to look at, the things you have reference for. They're all going to come out. And that's good. That's what you're into. And this class is about, finding yourself also as you draw these characters. Because characters are about people. And you're a person. So, it's about you also. So draw what you're into. Just go for it. But also, don't be afraid to experiment and try new things. Don't be afraid to learn and be bad at something as you learn it. When you try to draw a new subject, it's gonna look awkward at first, but as you draw it more and more, you're gonna get more familiar with it. It's gonna start to look natural, quote unquote. Everything natural at first isn't. So here I'm continuing to refine the figure. I think I'm more or less happy with it. It's good to back up and have a look at the entire figure sometimes. And like when I was drawing the anatomy, the same thing goes for armor. It's good to copy, it's good to look around. So when you sit down to draw, it all sort of comes out. And you can also, look at reference. Sometimes that can slow you down a little bit, but whatever works for you. So here I thought the character needed a weapon or sword. So I need to redraw the arm because it wasn't in the right position for me to put a sword into it. So kind of go over it, fiddle with it a little bit, redraw the arm, put in the sword. Try redrawing on another layer. And you want to move the figure over so you have space for the sword. And I'm going to cover over the old arm, or the second arm I drew, and add a layer and put some white on it. So I can see a little clearer. So don't be afraid to go in and fix certain parts or change just, parts of a drawing while you keep the rest of it the same, especially digitally. I mean, the same thing goes for if you're doing oil painting too. If you didn't like a part, just paint over it. And this is actually probably a good time for you to look at reference if you're not exactly sure how something goes. For me, I try to imagine and draw all the forms in 3 dimensions. And if you can get that correct, then you can draw it a lot easier because you understand where the shapes go and how they work in space.